course and how it is like to work in a think tank. So last year's event was very successful. Both the KCL Think Tank Society and the Career Center received great feedback from students about how the event was very constructive and beneficial for their career ambition. So this year we decided to renew the event and be part of the Career Service Public Policy Week, jointly organized by the Policy Society and the New Society and of course the Career Service. So I'm very pleased to welcome our fantastic panel of speakers that our extended liaison, Hugo Sharp and Tom William, can be invited. Adrian, Director of Publication at RUSI, Matt Tinsley, Economic and Social Policy Research Fellow at Policy Exchange, Stephen Tindale, Associate Fellow at the Center for European Reform, and Ellie, Cumbo, Researcher at the Fabian Society. Katerina Kilba is going to be late, but should arrive, and we apologize for Tinsley couldn't make it tonight. I would also like to briefly explain what a think tank is and why it is so important for us as students to get involved. So a think tank is a group of experts that come up with solutions which are then lobbied directly to decision makers. A think tank does research, like we do here at university and in academia, and then present policy recommendations and advices to the government. So its aim is to influence public policy using this conclusion and recommendation about what can be done. So it's basically about creating solutions towards societal problems. KCL Think Tank, as you may know, is the first student-led society in London, and we thought that creating a think tank was essential for two reasons. As students, public policy matters to all of us, and it matters even more to students since we're going to inherit the world and therefore first be affected. So the idea is to bring fresh perspective for problems that we will have to face tomorrow through brainstorming about issues and writing policy recommendation. These policy recommendations that we compile in our annual journal that you probably have seen, and you can actually download it online on websites. We actively hand this journal to decision makers, institutions, and governments to actually have an impact in public policy. So come along to our events, write in our journal, and if you want to get involved, sign up to our newsletter on kingsthinkttank.com. I should know that by now. So we're going to start by a 10-minute presentation of each speaker, where they work, what they do on a day-to-day basis, how they came to this job, and what skills are required to work in this think tank. Basically, what they would recommend to work in this think tank. And then we will have 5-10 minutes general questions. And so I apologize for the word reception that we weren't able to all because of some administration problems. So we're going to spend another 5-10 minutes for a kind of a networking session. So you will be able to speak directly to speakers and ask more specific questions. And then we will move to the George 5 minutes away from here for some drinks. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker for tonight, Adrian, who is the Director of Publication at RUSI.
My name is Adrian and I work at RUSI, which for those of you who don't know is think tank. It is the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies. So it's quite a mouthful. What is it? If you do war studies here, you probably know already, but for those of you who don't know, it is quite an old institute. It was founded in 1831 at the initiative of the Duke of Wellington. And in its modern form, it's an independent apolitical think tank on defence and security. Quite broadly defined. So we look at everything from the UK Armed Forces, equipment programs, all the way through to things like climate change impact in Latin America. What do we do? Well, we're probably, I think we're considered one of the larger think tanks in London, from Europe as well. And we do a mixture of things ranging from research, so that's your classic blue sky thinking, coming up with conclusions and recommendations. We do a host of publications as well, which is what I'm mainly involved in. And I do everything from publishing in-house research to bringing together outside experts and so on. And we also do a lot of events. Probably some of you here have been to one, there's lectures and after events and so on. We're a forum with independent debate, so we tend not to do advocacy. What we actually are, our Royal Charter is actually about being a critical link between the armed forces and society. So we will host different perspectives on a range of policy problems, or things that we think aren't yet policy problems, but might become in the future. So we look at a lot of critically vulnerable areas of the world, and so on. My previous experience, well, I did my MA here in War Studies, and I did an internship at RUSI, which then turned into a full-time position, which then is basically actually having had a department when my predecessor left. The experience, I think, proved useful for me going to a think tank, might be quite surprising. I think there's an impression amongst a lot of students and people trying to get into the think tank world that all we're looking for is sort of dazzlingly brilliant minds with the next big question, able to sort of marshal those different pieces of evidence and use sterling academic work. Don't get me wrong, that is helpful, but a lot of the daily grind in the think tank is actually much more quotidian. IT skills are essential, in particular good command of Microsoft Excel if you're, say, doing big writing or you're doing work for a government institution or government arm. For example, when you work for the Foreign Office, there are cities that we can account for how every pound is spent. And that sort of work tends to roll downhill, so if you're going for an entry-level position, you probably won't be writing about future transatlantic relations just yet. What you will be doing is compiling receipts of travel and getting people to attend conferences from all over the world. So boring things like that, but you can prove that you have the skills for that kind of thing, project management, showing that you can work on your own initiative, those are valuable skills. To highlight that, what I do, I'm head of department, and yet today I found myself stuffing envelopes in the morning, then showing them into around the institute, and then coding through the sort of key new contract we were doing. And this is all before I got to my emails. So the work in the think tank is extremely varied. It can often not be what you think. Any after lunch, as I sit down kind of doing what I consider to be my bread and butter, which is actually going through Twitter and various other social media, looking for kind of key debates, combing through the news lines, looking for new angles on stories, really not heavily online, for example. So it ranges from, arguing over copyright terms all the way through to kind of wondering, what next after French intervention, for example. So how do you get into a think tank? Well, I'd say there's an element of luck in it. A lot of think tanks in London aren't very large. There isn't a very high turnover of staff. There's not a very big intake frequently. So you need to be in the right place at the right time. Make yourself known. While you're students, you should be kind of blogging, writing, having a profile on the internet. So that if you do go for that opening the think tank, kind of a bit of edge, you show people your analysis, you show that you cultivate public persona. Have useful skills. Well, I'd say that every student I get, and I'm highly around, everyone's got a name, everyone subscribes to The Economist. What do you give that's different? If you can prove that you've done a job in the previous years that involves heavy project management or some kind of dealing with stress, so you can prioritize different workflows, even if it's not in the think tank or academic world, it's still useful for kind of the actual work we do. And finally, I think I'll just sort of end with a note of caution. It's very easy to misconstrue the work that actually goes on in the think tank. And I think some people can be disappointed when they get in, and it's not quite what they expect. It's not all research, and there are many roles in the think tank that are not research, and they can be very rewarding. So there are many sorts of duties you can be doing, and there are ways into the think tank that can lead on to things that might become more interesting. But you're not sitting down all day trying to solve all those problems. There's a lot of admin, there's a lot of frustration, as I think some other colleagues are saying. think tanks aren't the best paid job in London. But why do I do it? Well, it's very rewarding. You're at the centre of a lot of interesting debates. And I think one of the problems we as a society face in certain areas, whether it's security or our place in the world, or in terms of social cohesion, there are a lot of very interesting questions to be answered. So if you can sort of be aware of the downsides, it is a very rewarding career nonetheless.
Thank you very much, Adrian. So our next speaker for tonight will be Ellie from the Fabian Society.
Can I just try it without the microphone? It's a bit of a bit. Can people hear me if I don't use it? People at the back looking at you? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Yes, I should just do a little bit of an edit. I am both a policy researcher and I'm going to talk about the Fabian Society, but they're actually different roles. In my day job, I'm a policy researcher for a charity. So it's a bit like a think tank, but within a charitable context. And then outside of my work, I am on the executive for the Young Fabians, which is the under 31 branch of the Fabian Society. So I've been asked to talk about both of them, and that's what I'm going to try and do. I'll start with talking a little bit about the Fabians, because that actually is a think tank. Can people just give me a show of hands if you've heard of the Fabian Society? Brilliant, that's a good start. Thank you, panel. So you'll know then that the Fabian Society is an explicitly Labour-aligned think tank. Many think tanks have a fairly clear political angle, but they aren't necessarily very explicitly aligned to a certain political party. On the other hand, if you wish to join the Fabian Society, then you don't have to be a member of the Labour Party, but you can't be a member of another political party. And that leads me on to the next thing that's unique about Fabians, which is that they are a membership think tank. So unlike a think tank that produces policy reports and its main interaction with the public is to take an interest in those debates, we are actually for people to join and then try and influence and inform the direction of our work. As I mentioned, I'm involved with the under 31 branch of the Fabian Society. That was set up specifically to try and bring young people, including of your age, into the world of public policy. And it is our role to really try and reach out to young people who have an interest in public policy, not all of whom will be working for think tanks. And just to talk a little bit about the executive committee that I sit on, I work in public policy, as mentioned, for a charity, but I think I'm in the minority on an executive of 12. The other people that sit on that committee with me, some of them are still students, so we have quite an age range there. We have some who are working in academia after their student years, and we have one person who's recently joined who is a cleaner by day and a disability rights activist. So it is an extremely diverse place to be. And our role is to really lead policy projects on behalf of our members. Now you'll probably appreciate there's a bit of a tension there. If our members tell us that they want us to do a policy project, a report, a series of events on a particular area that is fairly niche, that is perhaps not going to be the thing that wins the next election for the Labour Party, we have to try and do that while squaring it with the fact that we also have to produce the big ideas that are applicable across the board, that are going to be of interest to the media, that are going to catch the eye of politicians. So squaring those two things is a big challenge for a membership think tank, and it's what our role is on the committee, which is why we are elected, to try and balance out the interests of the people who vote for us and the fact that we have a specific direction that we have to push the society in. I won't ask if people are already members of the Fabian Society, but if you join the Fabian Society, you are automatically members of the Young Fabians if you're under 31. This means that the question that I've been asked to answer for you, how do you get into the think tank I work for, is fairly easy. You join. So have a look at the Fabian website, where it's very easy. You can join, direct debit, etc. And I'm really happy to take questions on either the Young Fabians or the Fabian Society at the end. I should also note that at least 2 other members of the panel have previously worked for the Fabian Society, so the Fabians do get around, and if I can't answer your question, then I'm sure people will be able to help. I'd just like to come on briefly then to talk about my day job, because I think it offers an interesting contrasting view to what my fellow panel members are going to say, which is about think tanks per se, the conventional think tank structure. I work in public policy and therefore do similar things, but I'm doing it within a very specific context. Our job as a charity is first and foremost to serve the interests of the people for whom the charity was set up. Now, the charity I work for is a criminal justice charity. In particular, it delivers a service to victims and witnesses of crime. It's actually a statutory service the government is mandated to provide one way or another, and it happens that my charity is the one that's funded to deliver it. So my work in the public policy team around those services is to talk about the public policy context of victims and witnesses. It's to have a view on policing. It's to have a view on the courts. It's to have a view on probation. And it's to deal with the media. And one of the big things we're trying to do at the moment in my charity is to change the narrative on victims and witnesses of crime away from this idea that the only interests they have in the justice system are that offenders should be punished as harshly, as punitively as possible. Our research, the victims that we speak to because we offer services to them, and we deal with millions of them every year, tells us that that's not all that victims and witnesses want. What they want is rehabilitation that works. And you can see that there is a rehabilitation agenda that's coming out of the current government that allows us to represent that view that victims and witnesses have to government and try and help them to come up with policies that, on the one hand, satisfy their rehabilitation agenda, but also don't let down victims and witnesses, which the media in particular tend to think that any nod to rehabilitation will do. So that's a really important role for us, to try and bring the voice of people who are very traumatised, of people who are often extremely disadvantaged in life. You are more likely to be a victim of crime if you are working class, and if you live in particular areas of the country that are more deprived. It is our job to bring those voices into the public policy arena. One of the downsides of doing that in a charity context, of course, is that it can be less politically interesting, because it is always our view to give the answer that actually corresponds to the views of our victims and witnesses that we support. So when we get a media query, but don't you think this? Well, sorry, no. I'd really like to be able to say yes, so that you'll put us on the front page, but we can't do that. So there is a degree of always having to stick to the line that represents the people you're there to help. And that can mean that there's a bit less political strategy going on. On the other hand, if in a think tank you're overwhelmingly more conservative or more Labour-minded, you're probably going to have at least a 5-year period every couple of decades when no one really is interested in what you think, and you have to work a little harder because the party that you're most affiliated with is now in opposition and not in government. That's not the case in a charity. Whether it's Labour or the Conservatives, if they're interested in victims and witnesses, they should be equally interested in us. So we don't have those 5-year drop-offs, which my colleagues may feel is more or less relevant to some of their work. So there are real differences. There are also things in common, and I would certainly reiterate the point about it not being the best paid job in London. An advice that I'd give you if you're looking to do public policy perhaps in a charity context is don't be put off by the salary, because the opportunities that come with it for influence, progression, growth of expertise are as good as they are in any other public policy job. And secondarily, you really do have that direct closeness to the people that you're trying to help. So if you're also passionate about actually making a difference, it's a great context in which to be involved in public policy. I'll just finish by saying a little bit more about how you might get into working in charity-based policy, but I'll stick around at the end if anyone has any questions. Firstly, don't be under any illusions that just because you're going to earn slightly less, they're looking for a lesser skills base. It is exactly the same as going into a think tank. They want people with excellent qualifications, they want people with a work ethic, they want people who have put in the effort to show that they're interested. Internships are obviously a vexed issue for students, which I understand entirely because of the ethical issues, but you need to be aware that charities have a legal get-out to have unpaid internships, because it comes under the provisions for volunteering that charities are allowed to do because we have much lesser funding. We are unable to make a profit, and we get certain tax breaks and certain legal get-outs on volunteering as a result of that. Happy to talk about that a little bit more. But I'll pass back now to the rest of the panel who are going to talk about conventional think tanks. But do have a think about the charity sector as well, because it's different, it's lesser known, but I've loved every minute of it. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Tinsley for closing statement.
I'll offer the microphone, my voice is too close to them, so I don't want to push it too far. think we're seen as being on the centre right broadly. I think every think tank in some way is on the political spectrum. I think the main reason for that is that think tanks seem to fall out of a kind of policy vacuum. There was a point about 10 years ago when a lot of members of the Conservative Party did not believe that the policy ideas were coming through that suited them. And therefore people like Francis Moore, Michael Gove and Nick Bowles founded an organisation which after a few years turned into Policy Exchange. I would argue that today we're a completely different organisation. If you want to stay around, if you want to be policy relevant, then really sustain yourself and have to say something which is relevant across the political board. We definitely have strong links to the Conservative Party than anyone else, but sitting on the research board day in day out, I know I'm not politically aligned to anyone, and I'm not writing policy for a given party. It's really crucial that I think a think tank recognises that, and I think broadly think tanks that sustain themselves eventually start to step away from any direct political allegiance. As I say, today we've moved on quite a long way, but I think we have one of the largest research floors of any of the kind of broad think tanks. I counted, the head count today, I think we have 22 researchers. I work in economics and social policy. We also have education, climate justice, housing, digital government and energy environment, and to some extent security, but not so much given probably the number of specialist think tanks there are in that area. So as I said, 22 researchers cover a real range of topics. Within that means that as a researcher you are going to be working on a whole variety of things. I have areas I want to go into. Now I've been at Policy Exchange 18 months, I get the opportunity to kind of specialise to work on the areas within the labour market. Kind of regional analysis and wage analysis that I find really interesting. And I think that's one of the real values of a think tank. If you have something that you want to research and you are established enough to really get your teeth into, I think, at least with the Policy Exchange, you should get the opportunity to do that, assuming, of course, it's interesting to other people other than yourself. From my point of view, as I said, I get to work on things very broad, in a relatively non-political way. I get to look at evidence, I get to talk to people. I spent this morning going to an event hosted by the Work Foundation, who are, I guess in some ways, a think tank, but more aligned to academia. On Thursday, there's a launch of a pilot by the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. So all these things you can't get to go to, you get to interact with. There are people you get to talk to. There are academics and other kind of policy interested people who are constantly available and have some sort of interest in what you're doing, and it's incredibly engaging. I find it on a day-to-day basis interesting. I learn more than I can imagine learning anywhere else. And so I think there are huge benefits to working with a think tank. In terms of skills, I think if you're looking at career in public policy, then you're probably looking at getting into a think tank perhaps, and then moving on somewhere, looking at where you can go, looking at where influence can take you. I get to obviously write research reports in terms of kind of my experience. That's hugely valuable. I also get to control organisation of things. I get to kind of, from day one, I was organising meetings. I was getting in touch with people who I talk to. Having discussions with people in local authorities to see how these things actually work on the ground and how you can try and improve things. So I think it's incredibly engaging and it helps you develop a skill set which hopefully should help anyone kind of progress in the future. The drawback to the think tank world is in some ways it's quite small. I think in places like the United States they have in very different political systems, whereas they have a civil service which is quite political, or equivalent to the civil service which is more political. They turn over every 4 or 8 years, and everyone on the political side, or huge numbers of those people, filter through think tanks and have lots and lots of money. I don't think it could be any different over here. On my project I'm working on at the moment, I was working on this afternoon, it was a proposal we put together on something interesting. We believe we have expertise which allows us to research it. We go to a trust or foundation and ask for money to support the work. Now, trusts and foundations themselves are charities, that's what we are, and that means that the money in that is not going to be correct. The drawback, as has been mentioned, is that in the think tank world, the ceiling for what you're going to earn, especially on entry level, is lower than maybe some of your peers doing the sort of things you do. My friends who work in the city or in the consultancy are probably earning significantly more than I am, but I would bet they're probably not enjoying their jobs quite as much as I am. So that's, I think if you're looking at a way in and you're looking somewhere where you really gain skills quite quickly, then I don't think there's anywhere better if you're into public policy. As in how to get in, the luck factor has been mentioned a couple of times, and it's huge. Since I started, we've had a relatively low turnover. I don't know how many applicants there were for my job. I know how much there were, how many there were for other people's jobs. I know for me for a fact that there are people with better academic qualifications than I have. So you have to be the one that shows something special. You have to show you're keen for it. I've sat in on a few interviews for new research fellows, or we have research interns on for a while, and the people that really jump out are people who have answers to the questions. They may not be the answers that they think you want, but they can actually kind of grab the issue and they can give you something, an interview. It's not just about what the CV looks like on first glance. So yeah, to wrap up, I think work with think tanks is an incredible stepping stone. You will learn a phenomenal amount. It's a job that you have to really want, and you have to be able to really take the opportunities put in front of you. But as a stepping stone to go somewhere, I think it's pretty sensational, and I wouldn't change it for the world personally.
Tindale from the Center for European Reform.
Okay, thanks very much. The Centre for European Reform, I'm sure you're all very familiar with it because we're very successful, but just in case you're not, we are a pro-European think tank based in London, so we may be moving house in a few years' time. We are pro-European but not uncritical, which is a fine double negative. It means that when we think that the European Union is doing wrong things, as we do over common agricultural policy, for example, we are quite prepared to say so, and we don't get any money from the European Union because the bureaucracy of getting money out from this is appalling. So that enables us to be free-spirited and say when we think they're getting things wrong, but we are broadly in favour of more European cooperation and integration. I have personally worked for 4 think tanks, the Fabian Society, then the Institute for Public Policy Research, which is broadly similar to Policy Exchange on the other side, not a member, not affiliated formally to the Labour Party, but left of centre. And then the Green Alliance, which I'm sorry is another membership think tank, probably the only other one that I'm aware of, and now the Centre for European Reform. We don't have members. I've also worked for the civil service. That was my first job. That doesn't pay very well either. Had its rewards, but not enough to keep me there. And then I've worked for campaign organisations, not in the public policy area, and I worked for government, for the Labour government, and I also worked briefly for an energy utility, so I have a number of strands to my CV, but I can say, having gone back to the think tank world, that that is the one that suits me best. It won't suit everyone best, and I'll run through the good and the bad of working with think tanks briefly, and much of it has been said. The most attractive thing is that it's about ideas, it's about policy, it's about policy formulation, and it's about thinking what you hope are great thoughts. There is no party line in the sense of if you're in a think tank, you have to follow exactly what other people tell you to say, which of course was the case in the civil service. And when I was working for the Labour government, I had to say what the Labour government line was. So in a think tank, you have more freedom to express your own ideas. Clearly, depending on the think tank you're in, you have to follow the broad outline. So if I was to stand up and say, I think Britain should leave the EU, I'd be out of a job. And if when I was at Fabian, I'd say vote Tory, I'd be out of a job. And presumably, Policy Exchange, if you said vote Labour, you'd be out of a job. I don't know. You would, okay. Well, I'm UPR. If I had said vote Tory, it's a charity, so it has to be non-party affiliated. But I think it would have been difficult in those circumstances for me to say vote Conservative, because this was under the John Major government, and the media were very interested in what the left of centre was thinking about, and so I think you have quite a good media profile, and that brings me on to my next point. It can be quite good for getting media profile if you're in the right think tank at the right time. Me and my colleagues at the Centre for European Reform, we've been run up quite a lot in the last week and asked about whether Britain will leave the EU. So if you're interested in media work, if you're interested in public speaking, think tanks can offer a very good platform to do that. But most of the time I work on climate change, and to be honest, the media has lost interest in climate change at the moment. So in that sense, the media profile has disappeared somewhat. I hope it'll come back, but who knows. And the ideas that you have in think tanks, if they are good and if they are well expressed, you can have influence over public policy. And in straightforward career terms, climbing up the career ladder, if you want to be a special advisor to government, the think tank route is the best way to achieve that. Most special advisors have worked in think tanks, and I worked as a special advisor, having worked in, at that stage, three think tanks. So it worked for me. The downside of working in think tanks, pay has been mentioned, stability in the sense that think tanks have to get money from somewhere. They don't generate profit, and so they have to raise money either from public sources or from private companies or from foundations. That is intrinsically quite uncertain, and it depends on the broader political context. If you're left of centre at the moment, it's probably more difficult to raise money than if you're right of centre. I don't know, because the Centre for European Reform is not either left or right of centre, and we are getting quite a lot of money, not enough, of course. Everyone's got some government, but we're getting quite a lot because Europe is in the news. But I'm sure that some other organisations, climate organisations, for example, are struggling to raise funds. So the stability is not great. Working in a think tank is also rarely an adrenaline rush. It's more sort of measured. I mean, yeah, we have to meet deadlines and all this, but it's not generally about this has to be done today, and if it is, then that will happen, and being able to show that you have influence and outcome. And that's really one of the most challenging things, is that you can think to yourself, okay, I wrote that, or I said that, and then that happened, and therefore I influenced it. It's very difficult to prove that. And depending on what you go, it may be sometimes quite challenging to think, is it really worthwhile? Am I really having any influence over anything? So, if you are determined to be able to show and convince everyone, including yourself, that you have led to serious outcomes and changed the world, then you have to think about whether a think tank really is the place for you. I mean, I would encourage you to do it, because I think think tanks are very influential. But you'll have to be, I suppose, self-confident enough to be able to believe that you have influenced outcomes, even though there's no direct route or direct link with what you said and what has been done. In terms of how you get a job in a think tank, I would say, well, first of all, you should always look at who funds think tanks, and there's a website called Who Funds, which is looking at think tanks and ones that are showing who funds them and who doesn't. So ones that don't show who funds them. And my view is that a think tank should say where their money comes from, and that is something you should take into account before you apply to a think tank. And in terms of internships, you should, in my view, not do internships unless you get paid. Centre for European Reform pays its interns, I can say that. that. But you have to show other interests and other activities as well. Somebody who's just been at their books for the last 3 or 4 years is not going to appeal in an interview. That's my impression anyway. It might be when I've done interviews, I look for things other than academic studies, which is a bit paradoxical because think tanks are about reading and writing and so on, so academia is a good background, but you need to be able to show more things. But I would say, generally, and I'm very happy to talk to people afterwards, think tanks are excellent, but they're not the fastest moving organisations, and you have to have great determination and great self-confidence for them to be the place for you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Our last speaker, Katerina Peva, who is also from a student from the War Studies Department, is still running late, but she'll be there in 10 minutes. So we're going to start with the Q&A session. I'm going to take 3 questions. So one here, one there,